During the 1950s and 1960s, the automotive world saw a mix of luxury cars and more affordable models. While some cars from this era became symbols of elegance and power, others were built to serve a much more budget-conscious audience. These cars were often poorly made, unreliable, and generally undesirable. Here are 13 of the crappiest cars from the 1950s and 1960s that were often the only options for those with limited finances. The Vauxhall Victor, produced between 1957 and 1961, was Vauxhall's attempt at providing an affordable family sedan for the post-war British market. Despite its initial appeal as a budget-friendly option, the Victor quickly gained a notorious reputation for poor build quality, making it a prime example of a car that promised much but delivered little in terms of longevity and satisfaction. At its core, the Victor was designed to be an economical, practical vehicle for the average family, with a price tag that reflected its modest intentions. On the surface, it appeared to offer everything a family would need: enough seating space, a reasonably sized trunk for groceries or luggage, and an engine capable of handling daily commutes. The styling, though conservative, was in line with the understated designs of the late 1950s. Vauxhall attempted to give the car a modern, American-inspired look with subtle tail fins and chrome touches, but this design failed to inspire much excitement or admiration. Instead, the Victor's aesthetic was considered bland and uninspiring by many, particularly when compared to the sleeker, more attractive cars being produced by competitors at the time. One of the Victor's most significant flaws, and the one that contributed most to its poor reputation, was its tendency to rust. The car's bodywork was notoriously susceptible to corrosion, particularly in the damp British climate. Many Victors were reported to develop rust problems within just a few years of being on the road, often to the point where the body would begin to disintegrate, rendering the vehicle almost unusable. Owners who had purchased the car in hopes of dependable, long-term transportation were left disappointed as their cars deteriorated rapidly. Rust would appear not just in expected places like the wheel arches or undercarriage, but also in more visible areas like the doors, hood, and roof, making the car unsightly as well as structurally unsound. This issue severely damaged the Victor's reputation, as it became synonymous with poor durability and unreliability. In addition to its rust problems, the Victor suffered from mechanical issues that further tarnished its image. Its 1.5-liter engine, while adequate for basic driving, was widely criticized for being underpowered, particularly when compared to similarly sized cars from other manufacturers. The Victor struggled to provide the kind of performance expected by drivers, especially when carrying a full load of passengers or traveling on highways. The engine lacked the refinement needed for smooth, consistent driving, often leading to sluggish acceleration and lackluster handling. This made the Victor a less than ideal choice for anyone seeking more than just basic transportation. While the car was relatively fuel efficient for its time, this small advantage did little to offset the broader issues with performance. Furthermore, the interior of the Vauxhall Victor reflected its budget status. The cabin was sparsely equipped, offering few comforts or amenities. The materials used were basic at best, with cheap upholstery and poorly finished plastics that wore down quickly. Noise insulation was minimal, meaning that drivers and passengers could easily hear the engine, road noise and wind rushing past the windows at higher speeds. The ride quality was also subpar, with a suspension that struggled to absorb bumps and uneven surfaces. As a result, the Victor did little to provide comfort on long journeys, leaving passengers feeling fatigued after extended trips. As the years went on, the Victor's faults became more widely known, and public perception of the car continued to decline. What initially seemed like a promising, affordable option for families turned into a source of frustration for many owners, who found themselves dealing with rust, breakdowns, and frequent repairs. While the car's low price made it accessible to a wide range of buyers, it also meant that quality was sacrificed in many key areas, leading to significant long-term costs in terms of maintenance and upkeep. Despite these drawbacks, the Vauxhall Victor still managed to sell in decent numbers during its production run. For some, the low price and availability made it an attractive option, particularly for those who could not afford more reliable alternatives. However, as the car's reputation for rust and unreliability grew, its appeal waned and sales began to decline. The model's legacy, unfortunately, became one of missed potential and disappointment, as Vauxhall failed to address the key issues that plagued the car from the outset. In the years since its production ended, the Vauxhall Victor has become a cautionary tale in the automotive world. While the car was initially marketed as a practical, affordable family vehicle, it became notorious for its poor build quality and lack of longevity. The Ford Consul Classic, produced between 1961 and 1963, was Ford's effort to bring a bit of American-inspired flair to the British family car market. However, despite its intentions, the car fell short of expectations. Aimed at families who wanted a bit more style and sophistication in their daily driver, the Consul Classic ended up being remembered for its peculiar design choices, mediocre performance, and a number of practical shortcomings that overshadowed its relatively affordable price. One of the most striking aspects of the Consul Classic was its unusual styling, which borrowed heavily from American car designs of the 1950s. In an era when automotive trends in the UK and Europe were moving toward more compact, streamlined designs, the Consul Classic's bulky proportions and large tail fins felt outdated and out of sync with contemporary tastes. The car's front end featured a somewhat rounded grille and twin headlights, which were acceptable for the time, but it was the rear that drew the most criticism. The exaggerated tail fins, a remnant of the flashy American designs of the previous decade, seemed out of place on a British family sedan, giving the car a look that was both awkward and ungainly. Many critics and potential buyers felt that the design was trying too hard to be stylish, but ended up looking clumsy instead. The car's bulkier dimensions didn't just affect its appearance, they also contributed to its performance and handling issues. The Ford Consul Classic was heavier than many of its competitors, which, when combined with its relatively small engine, made for lackluster performance. Under the hood, the Consul Classic was equipped with a 1.3-liter or 1.5-liter inline-4 engine, which was considered underpowered for a car of its size. The engine struggled to provide the kind of acceleration and speed that drivers wanted, especially when carrying a full load of passengers or luggage. While the car was capable of reaching modest highway speeds, it often felt sluggish, and drivers were left wanting more power when merging or overtaking. Handling was another area where the Consul Classic disappointed. Despite its large size, the car didn't offer the kind of stability or smooth ride that one might expect from a family sedan. The suspension system, while adequate on smooth roads, didn't cope well with rougher surfaces or sharp turns, leading to a bumpy and uncomfortable ride. The car's steering also felt vague and imprecise, which made it harder to handle in tight urban environments. This lack of agility was a significant drawback, especially for city dwellers who needed a car that could navigate narrow streets and parking spaces with ease. Instead, the Consul Classic often felt cumbersome and unwieldy, which diminished its appeal as a practical family car. Inside, the Consul Classic was relatively spacious, and Ford did make an effort to provide a more comfortable experience for drivers and passengers. However, the interior materials and overall build quality left much to be desired. The dashboard and trim were made from basic plastics and vinyl that didn't hold up well over time, leading to a somewhat cheap and dated feel. While it did offer a decent amount of legroom and headroom, the car didn't include many of the modern amenities or conveniences that were starting to become standard in other vehicles by the early 1960s. This lack of features, combined with the uninspired interior design, left many buyers feeling underwhelmed, especially when compared to competitors that offered more comfort and innovation for a similar price. Another issue that plagued the Consul Classic was its reliability. Although Ford had a solid reputation for building dependable cars, the Consul Classic suffered from a number of mechanical issues that frustrated owners. The engine, while serviceable, wasn't particularly durable, and many cars experienced problems with overheating or excessive oil consumption after just a few years on the road. The transmission and gearbox were also prone to malfunction, leading to costly repairs and frequent trips to the mechanic. For a car that was marketed as a budget-friendly option for families, these reliability issues proved to be a significant drawback, as they added to the overall cost of ownership and detracted from the car's value proposition. Despite its flaws, the Ford Consul Classic did have some redeeming qualities. Its relatively low price made it an accessible option for families who needed a car, but couldn't afford more premium models. The Reliant Regal, produced between 1953 and 1973, is one of the most iconic oddities in automotive history, thanks to its unusual three-wheel design and status as one of the cheapest cars available in Britain. While it achieved a certain level of fame, especially through its use in British pop culture, the car was plagued by significant performance and safety concerns, which prevented it from ever being considered a truly practical vehicle for most drivers. The primary feature that set the Reliant Regal apart was, of course, its three wheels, two at the back and one at the front. This unconventional configuration helped keep production costs and taxes low, as it allowed the vehicle to be classified as a three-wheeled motorcycle rather than a car, which came with certain tax benefits in the UK. This made the Regal an attractive option for those who needed cheap transportation, but couldn't afford the rising costs of conventional four-wheeled cars. However, this design also came with a number of significant drawbacks, the most serious of which was stability, or the lack thereof. With only one wheel at the front, the Reliant Regal was notoriously prone to tipping over, especially when taking corners at anything more than a modest speed. The car's narrow front wheelbase and extremely lightweight made it difficult to control, and many drivers found themselves losing balance or even flipping the car in situations where a regular vehicle would have remained stable. This instability was one of the most criticized aspects of the Regal, and it became a defining feature of the car's somewhat infamous reputation. For many, driving the Regal felt more like piloting a small, fragile contraption than a real car, with the risk of tipping over constantly in the back of their minds. Adding to the Regal's instability was its incredibly light construction. The car was built from fiberglass, which contributed to its featherweight feel, but also gave it a somewhat flimsy, insubstantial quality. While fiberglass allowed for cheaper production and was rust-resistant, the thin body panels made the car feel fragile and insecure on the road. Drivers often describe the experience as akin to driving a tin can, with little protection from the outside world in the event of an accident. This ultra-lightweight build, while helping with fuel efficiency, further contributed to the car's instability, especially in windy conditions or when traveling at higher speeds. In terms of performance, the Reliant Regal was severely underpowered. Most models were equipped with a tiny 600cc engine, which, while adequate for the car's light frame, struggled to deliver anything resembling decent acceleration or top speed. The Regal was designed for economy, not for speed, and this became painfully apparent when trying to keep up with regular traffic. The car's engine output was just enough to get it around town, but it faltered on highways, where its slow pace and limited power became a serious disadvantage. For those who needed a vehicle for long-distance travel or more than just local errands, the Regal was far from ideal. The interior of the Reliant Regal was basic, to say the least. As with most budget cars of the time, creature comforts were minimal. The seating was cramped, and the cabin lacked any real sense of refinement or style. The dashboard was simple, offering little more than the bare essentials, and the overall feel inside the car was Spartan, bordering on uncomfortable for longer journeys. While this might have been acceptable for a car that was designed purely to be cheap and functional, it certainly didn't endear the Regal to anyone looking for a bit more comfort in their daily commute. Despite these numerous drawbacks, the Reliant Regal did achieve a certain level of popularity, especially in the 1960s and early 1970s. For many working-class families or individuals on a tight budget, the Regal represented one of the few affordable ways to get on the road. The car's low cost and the tax advantages it provided made it an attractive option for those who otherwise couldn't afford a four-wheeled car. Its small size and simplicity also made it easy to maintain and repair, further adding to its appeal for budget-conscious drivers. The Reliant Regal also gained fame as a fixture in British pop culture, largely thanks to its use in television. One of the most notable appearances was in the British sitcom Only Fools and Horses, where a bright yellow three-wheeled version of the Regal, the Reliant Regal Supervan 3, became the iconic vehicle of the show's main characters. This portrayal cemented the Regal's place in the public imagination as a symbol of quirky, budget-friendly motoring, even if the show often poked fun at the car's lack of reliability and its frequent breakdowns. In the end, the Reliant Regal, while never a great car by most traditional standards, holds a unique place in automotive history. The BMW 700, produced from 1959 to 1965, holds a significant place in the history of BMW, as it played a crucial role in saving the company from financial ruin after World War II. However, while the 700 helped BMW survive a difficult period, the car itself was far from a luxurious or powerful vehicle. Instead, it was designed as a small, budget-friendly car aimed at the mass market, but it came with limitations that made it less appealing for those looking for performance, comfort, or refinement. The BMW 700 was a departure from the larger, more luxurious cars that BMW had been known for before the war. Following World War II, BMW found itself in dire financial straits, and the company needed a model that could sell in high volumes to keep the company afloat. The 700 was intended to be that car. It was built as a small, economical vehicle, with the aim of appealing to the growing number of post-war consumers who were seeking affordable transportation. In this sense, the 700 succeeded, as it became a popular model in Europe and played a key role in stabilizing BMW's finances. One of the defining features of the BMW 700 was its rear-mounted engine. The car was powered by a modest 697 cubic centimeter flat twin engine, which, while fuel-efficient, lacked the power needed for anything beyond basic driving. The engine produced around 30 horsepower, which was enough for city driving, but it struggled to perform at higher speeds or on highways. Acceleration was slow, and the car's top speed hovered around 75 miles per hour, meaning it was not particularly well suited for long journeys or for drivers who wanted a bit of performance from their vehicle. The rear-mounted engine also had its drawbacks in terms of handling, as it made the car somewhat tail-heavy, which could lead to less predictable behavior on the road, especially for inexperienced drivers. In terms of design, the BMW 700 had a clean and simple appearance, but it lacked the elegance or excitement that BMW enthusiasts might have expected from the brand. The car's body was designed by Italian designer Giovanni Michelotti, who gave it a compact, utilitarian look that was functional but not particularly stylish. The two-door coupe and four-door sedan versions of the car were small and relatively plain, with little in the way of design flair to set them apart from other budget cars of the time. The interior was similarly basic, offering minimal comfort and amenities. The dashboard was simple and Spartan, with just the essential gauges and controls, and the seats were not particularly plush, making long journeys uncomfortable for passengers. Despite its shortcomings in power and comfort, the BMW 700 was affordable, which made it attractive to a large segment of the market. For many people in post-war Europe, the 700 represented a way to own a car at a time when economic conditions were still difficult. It provided basic transportation at a reasonable price, and for BMW, that was enough to keep the company afloat during a challenging period. The car was produced in several variants, including a sportier version known as the 700 Sport, which offered slightly more power and a more engaging driving experience, though it still couldn't compete with true sports cars of the era. While the BMW 700 wasn't a performance powerhouse, it did have one significant achievement in motorsports. The car's lightweight body and compact engine made it a surprisingly agile contender in certain racing circuits. In fact, a modified version of the 700 was raced by famed driver Hans Stuck, and the car enjoyed some success in hill climb races. This racing pedigree, while not enough to redefine the car's legacy, added an interesting chapter to the 700's history and showed that even a modest budget car could be competitive in the right hands. Ultimately, the BMW 700's importance lies more in its role as a financial savior for BMW than in its technical or design merits. It was not a car that turned heads for its speed, luxury, or innovation, but it was a car that came along at exactly the right time to help BMW survive a tumultuous post-war period. The car's affordability and practicality made it a sales success, especially in Germany and other parts of Europe, and it gave BMW the breathing room it needed to eventually return to producing the high-performance luxury cars for which the brand would later become famous. For those who owned a BMW 700, it was a reliable, no-frills vehicle that provided basic transportation at a time when many people were just looking for something affordable to get them from point A to point B. However, for enthusiasts who associate BMW with powerful engines, luxury, and driving pleasure, the 700 was far from satisfying. It lacked the refinement, speed, and excitement that would later define the brand's cars. And in that sense, the Austin A70 Hampshire, produced between 1948 and 1950, was intended as a mid-size family sedan to meet the needs of post-war British consumers. While it represented a step up in size and luxury from smaller Austin models, the A70 Hampshire was quickly overshadowed by more modern vehicles, both in terms of performance and design. Unfortunately for Austin, the Hampshire suffered from being both underpowered and aesthetically unremarkable, which contributed to its short lifespan and limited success in the market. At the heart of the A70 Hampshire's struggles was its engine. Powered by a 2.2-liter inline-4 engine, the car produced just 67 horsepower, hardly enough to comfortably move its bulky body. The A70 was heavy for its time, and the combination of a weak engine and significant weight made for sluggish acceleration and poor handling. It wasn't particularly fast, even by the standards of the late 1940s, and the driving experience was uninspiring, especially on the open road. While it could reach a top speed of around 80 miles per hour, it took considerable time to get there, and most drivers found it far more suited to sedate urban driving than anything more adventurous. The Hampshire's design also left much to be desired. Boxy and conservative, the car lacked the stylish curves and flair that were becoming popular in both Europe and the United States during the late 1940s. Its upright grille and blocky proportions made it look dated almost as soon as it hit the market, and while it was functional, the design was far from inspiring. In an era when car manufacturers were beginning to experiment with sleeker, more aerodynamic shapes, the A70 Hampshire looked old-fashioned, which didn't help its appeal among buyers seeking something more modern and forward-looking. Inside, the A70 Hampshire continued the theme of functionality over flair. The interior was reasonably spacious, offering room for 5 passengers, but it was sparsely appointed, with few of the luxury features that consumers were starting to expect in mid-size cars. The dashboard was simple and utilitarian, with basic controls and instrumentation. While the car was built solidly, it lacked the refinement or comfort found in competing models. Noise levels were high, especially at higher speeds, and the suspension was tuned more for durability than comfort, making for a rather rough ride on less-than-perfect roads. One area where the Austin A70 Hampshire did manage to find some success was in export markets, particularly in Australia, where larger vehicles were in demand. Its size and ruggedness were appreciated in countries with rougher terrain and longer distances between towns. In those markets, the A70 found a small niche, and it was even adapted for some commercial uses, including as taxis and light delivery vehicles. However, this limited success couldn't offset the car's lackluster performance in its home market of the UK. As the 1950s began, the automotive industry was rapidly evolving, and the Austin A70 Hampshire was quickly overtaken by newer, more advanced cars. Its replacement, the Austin A70 Hereford, introduced in 1950, offered a slightly more modern design and improved performance. But even that model struggled to compete with the rapidly improving competition. By the time the Hampshire was discontinued in 1950, it was already clear that the car had failed to capture the public's imagination in the way Austin had hoped. In hindsight, the Austin A70 Hampshire represents a transitional vehicle in post-war Britain, caught between the austerity of the 1940s and the more innovative, consumer-focused designs of the 1950s. While it was a solid and reliable car, it lacked the power, style, and comfort that consumers increasingly demanded. For buyers who simply needed a practical vehicle to get from point A to point B, the Hampshire sufficed, but it offered little more than that. As a result, it remains a largely forgotten model in Austin's history, overshadowed by more successful and memorable cars that followed in its wake. The Renault 4CV, produced from 1947 to 1961, was Renault's answer to the demand for affordable, small cars in post-war Europe. Designed to be cheap, practical, and accessible to the average French citizen, the 4CV was Renault's first mass-produced vehicle, And while it achieved widespread popularity due to its affordability, it was far from a well-rounded or universally admired car. One of the most significant criticisms of the Renault 4CV was its cramped size. Measuring less than 4 meters in length, the car was compact, even by the standards of the late 1940s. Its small dimensions made it challenging to fit more than 2 adults comfortably, let alone families, for whom the car was theoretically designed. The rear seats were particularly tight, and even the front cabin felt claustrophobic, with limited legroom and narrow seats. For families or those who needed a bit more space, the 4CV quickly proved inadequate, especially for longer trips or journeys requiring the transport of luggage. The rear engine layout, a hallmark of the 4CV, also created handling challenges. While the car's rear-mounted, air-cooled engine allowed for a more spacious front compartment and contributed to the 4CV's compact design, it caused the vehicle to suffer from unpredictable handling. The car's weight distribution was skewed, and it was prone to oversteering, especially in tight corners or on wet roads. While not unsafe by the standards of the time, it required careful driving and wasn't as forgiving or stable as front-engine cars. For drivers unaccustomed to rear-engine layouts, the 4CV's handling quirks could be unsettling. Under the hood, the Renault 4CV was powered by a modest 760 cubic centimeter, 4-cylinder engine that produced just 21 horsepower. This made the car notoriously slow, with a top speed of around 60 miles per hour, and its acceleration was sluggish at best. For city driving or short commutes, this lack of power might have been acceptable, but on highways or longer journeys, the 4CV struggled to keep up with faster-moving traffic. The engine also lacked refinement, and the noise from the small but hard-working motor permeated the cabin, making for a noisy ride, especially at higher speeds. Despite its shortcomings, the Renault 4CV found popularity in post-war France for several reasons. In the aftermath of World War II, much of Europe was economically devastated, and there was a significant demand for affordable, fuel-efficient cars that could meet the basic needs of the population. The 4CV was cheap to buy and run, and its fuel-efficient engine was appealing to buyers looking to save money on gas during a period of economic hardship. Renault marketed the car as the people's car, and it succeeded in filling that role, much like the Volkswagen Beetle did in Germany. The 4CV was also relatively simple and easy to maintain. Its small engine and straightforward design meant that repairs could be done without extensive mechanical knowledge, and parts were widely available. This made it a practical choice for those who needed a reliable, if unremarkable, car. However, its simplicity came at the cost of comfort and performance, and many owners found the car lacking in both areas. One of the 4CV's few strengths was its affordability, which helped it achieve considerable success in the marketplace. In total, over 1 million Renault 4CVs were produced, making it the first French car to reach such production numbers. It was exported to several countries, including the United States, where its small size and low cost made it a niche option for budget-conscious buyers. However, outside of France, the car's cramped interior and lack of power limited its appeal. As the 1960s approached, the Renault 4CV began to feel increasingly outdated. The small underpowered engine, combined with its dated design, couldn't compete with newer, more advanced small cars that were entering the market, such as the Citroën 2CV and the Renault 4, which would eventually replace the 4CV. By 1961, Renault had shifted its focus to more modern designs, and the 4CV was quietly phased out after 14 years of production. In retrospect, the Renault 4CV occupies an important place in automotive history, particularly in France, as a symbol of the post-war recovery and the democratization of car ownership. It provided affordable mobility to a generation of French families who, for the first time, had access to personal transportation. However, while it served its purpose, the car's limitations in terms of space, power, and handling ensured that it was never truly beloved by car enthusiasts. It was a utilitarian vehicle, cheap, functional, and nothing more, which may explain why, despite its popularity, it is rarely remembered with much affection today. The Borgward Isabella, produced between 1954 and 1962, was a car that initially made a strong impression thanks to its stylish design and an attempt to position itself as a budget-friendly alternative to pricier German models like those from Mercedes-Benz and BMW. It represented the flagship model for the Borgward Group, an automaker that had gained a solid reputation for building dependable vehicles. However, despite its outward elegance and reasonable price tag, the Isabella was marred by significant reliability issues and mechanical shortcomings that tarnished its potential to compete with more established brands. At first glance, the Borgward Isabella was a rather attractive car, particularly for a mid-priced model. Its sleek and streamlined design, featuring smooth curves and a modern profile, was ahead of its time compared to some of the more conservative designs coming out of post-war Germany. The interior, too, was well appointed for a car in its class, with a dashboard that had a clean, simple layout and comfortable seating that gave it a somewhat premium feel. This combination of style and comfort made the Isabella appealing to buyers who wanted a car that looked good without the premium price tag attached to other German vehicles. Beneath the stylish exterior, however, the Isabella faced several engineering challenges. The most prominent of these was the car's tendency to overheat. The 1.5-liter four-cylinder engine, while adequate in terms of power output at around 60 to 75 horsepower, was prone to thermal management problems. This overheating issue was particularly problematic during longer journeys or in warmer climates, where the engine would frequently reach high temperatures, causing performance to suffer and increasing the risk of engine failure. The cooling system simply couldn't cope under certain conditions, and as a result, many owners experienced recurring breakdowns. Aside from the overheating problem, the engine and mechanical components of the Borgward Isabella were known for being less durable than its competitors. The car's suspension and drivetrain, though providing a relatively comfortable ride, were subject to frequent wear and tear. Owners often found themselves dealing with mechanical failures far sooner than expected, and the cost of repairs could quickly escalate, making the Isabella a more expensive proposition in the long run than its low initial price suggested. Moreover, the Isabella's reliability issues were compounded by poor build quality in some areas. Borgward was a smaller automaker compared to giants like Volkswagen or Mercedes-Benz, and their production facilities struggled to meet the same quality standards. As a result, many of the early Isabellas were plagued by inconsistent build quality, with some vehicles having poorly aligned body panels, substandard paint jobs, and mechanical components that didn't meet rigorous durability standards. Over time, this led to a perception that the Isabella was an unreliable car, with many owners losing confidence in the brand's ability to produce a dependable vehicle. Despite its shortcomings, the Borgward Isabella did enjoy some popularity, particularly in its home market of Germany. The car's combination of stylish looks, reasonable pricing, and comfortable ride quality made it a viable option for middle-class buyers who couldn't afford more prestigious brands. Borgward even introduced several variations of the Isabella to appeal to different market segments, including a two-door coupe, a station wagon, and even a convertible model. These variants helped broaden the car's appeal, but they did little to address the underlying reliability issues that continued to plague the brand. The Borgward Isabella was also noteworthy for its relatively advanced engineering features, at least on paper. It was one of the few cars in its class to feature a unitary construction, or monocoque chassis, which made the car lighter and more fuel-efficient compared to rivals that used traditional body-on-frame designs. Additionally, the Isabella offered disc brakes on some models, which was a cutting-edge technology at the time. However, these innovations were overshadowed by the car's mechanical flaws, which limited its long-term viability as a reliable family car. The struggles of the Isabella reflected broader issues within the Borgward Group. While the company had built a solid reputation in the post-war era, it faced significant financial difficulties due to its inability to compete with the economies of scale enjoyed by larger automakers. Borgward's management, led by the ambitious but often overextended Carl F.W. Borgward, was slow to address the company's financial and production inefficiencies. By the early 1960s, these problems had reached a tipping point, and Borgward went bankrupt in 1961, bringing an abrupt end to the Isabella's production run the following year. The NSU Prinz III, produced between 1957 and 1962, was intended to be an affordable, compact car for the masses, but it fell short of expectations in several key areas. Designed by the German company NSU, which had a reputation for innovation, particularly in motorcycles, the Prinz 3 was supposed to be a simple, budget-friendly solution for post-war Europe. While it met the needs of those who couldn't afford anything more luxurious, the car's lack of power, uninspired design, and poor reliability made it an underwhelming choice for most drivers. One of the most glaring shortcomings of the NSU Prinz 3 was its engine. Powered by a tiny two-cylinder, air-cooled motor that displaced just 583 cubic centimeters, the car produced a meager 30 horsepower. This severely limited the car's performance, particularly on highways or long-distance travel. With a top speed of around 60 to 65 miles per hour, 100 to 105 kilometers per hour, the Prinz III was more suited to city driving, where high speeds weren't necessary. However, even in urban environments, the car's sluggish acceleration made it difficult to keep up with traffic. The engine's small size and basic design also contributed to excessive noise, giving the Prinz III a reputation for being one of the louder, less refined cars of its era. The design of the NSU Prinz III was similarly uninspired. The car had a distinctly boxy shape, which may have been practical in terms of maximizing interior space, but it did nothing to enhance its visual appeal. Unlike some of its competitors that managed to blend affordability with at least a hint of style, the Prinz III came across as plain and utilitarian. The car's front end was particularly unremarkable, with small, round headlights and a simple, horizontal grille that lacked any real character. From the side, its short, stubby proportions didn't help matters, making it appear almost like a scaled-down version of a more traditional car. It wasn't unattractive in the same way that some more radical designs of the time were, but it certainly wasn't a car that turned heads for the right reasons. Inside, the Prinz III didn't fare much better. The interior was extremely basic, with minimal features and an overall sense of cheapness. The materials used were Spartan, with plastic and vinyl dominating the cabin, giving it a utilitarian feel that was far from comfortable or luxurious. The seating was cramped, particularly in the back, where legroom was limited and adults would find long journeys uncomfortable. The ride quality itself was rough, thanks in part to the car's small size and stiff suspension, which made even small bumps in the road feel exaggerated. For those used to larger, more comfortable cars, the Prinz III's interior would have been a disappointment. But even budget-conscious buyers had to admit that it was lacking in both comfort and convenience. In terms of reliability, the NSU Prinz III was far from a standout performer. While it wasn't a complete disaster mechanically, the car had its fair share of problems, particularly as it aged. The air-cooled engine, while simple in theory, was prone to overheating, especially on longer trips or during hot weather. Additionally, the lack of refinement in the engine design meant that components wore out faster than on more robust vehicles, leading to frequent repairs. The electrical system was another weak point, with many owners reporting issues with the car's wiring and lights. These problems, combined with the car's overall lack of durability, made it clear that the Prinz III was not built to last. Despite its flaws, the NSU Prinz III did have a few redeeming qualities. It was small and nimble, making it easy to maneuver through crowded city streets and park in tight spaces. Its compact size also made it relatively fuel-efficient, which was an important consideration for budget-conscious buyers in the late 1950s and early 1960s. The car's low purchase price was another selling point, allowing many people to own a vehicle who otherwise couldn't afford one. However, these advantages were overshadowed by the car's many weaknesses, and for most buyers, the trade-offs weren't worth it. The NSU Prinz III ultimately struggled to make a lasting impact in the market. While it was inexpensive and accessible, its lack of power, uninspiring design, and poor reliability meant that it was quickly overshadowed by competitors that offered better performance and more appealing features. NSU would later go on to develop more successful models, including the revolutionary NSU Row 80 with its innovative rotary engine. But the Prinz III remains a footnote in the company's history, an example of a car that aimed to be practical and affordable, but failed to deliver in the ways that mattered most. Today, the Prinz 3 is mostly remembered as a quirky, outdated budget car that highlighted the challenges of post-war European automakers trying to meet the demands of a rapidly evolving market. The Opel Rekord P1, produced from 1957 to 1960, was Opel's attempt to create a mid-sized family car that embodied modern design at a time when the automotive industry was rapidly evolving. On the surface, it appeared to be a sleek and stylish vehicle for its era, borrowing design cues from American cars, including a wraparound windshield and modest fins at the rear. However, despite its relatively modern appearance, the Rekord P1 was far from impressive when it came to performance and driving experience, leaving it overshadowed by more capable competitors of the time. One of the Rekord P1's main drawbacks was its lack of power. The car was equipped with a modest 1.5-liter inline-4 engine, which produced around 45 horsepower. In a market that was becoming increasingly competitive with more powerful vehicles, the Rekord P1's underwhelming engine left it struggling to keep pace. Acceleration was sluggish, and the car had difficulty maintaining high speeds on open roads, making long-distance journeys feel drawn out and exhausting. While it was sufficient for city driving, where performance demands were lower, the Rekord P1 lacked the kind of power that drivers wanted for more versatile use, particularly on highways where faster speeds were becoming the norm. The suspension system on the Rekord P1 was another area where the car failed to impress. It used a basic setup that wasn't well tuned for comfort or handling. On rougher roads, the ride was bumpy and jarring, leaving passengers feeling every pothole and uneven surface. This lack of suspension refinement was particularly noticeable on longer trips, where the constant bouncing and vibration could become tiresome. Handling was similarly disappointing. While the Rekord P1 could navigate tight city streets, its steering was vague and unresponsive, making it feel disconnected from the road. Cornering, especially at higher speeds, was less than confidence-inspiring, and drivers often had to contend with body roll and a general lack of stability. Comfort was also an issue inside the Rekord P1. Despite its relatively spacious interior, the materials used were fairly basic, and the seating left much to be desired. The car's seats lacked adequate cushioning, and over time, they would wear down, providing even less support. The dashboard was minimalist, reflecting the car's affordable nature, but this simplicity often felt more like a cost-cutting measure than a design choice. Passengers would have found the cabin somewhat Spartan compared to other cars in the same segment, which were beginning to introduce more luxurious and user-friendly features. The noise insulation in the Rekord P1 was also minimal, allowing road and engine noise to filter into the cabin, adding to the discomfort on longer journeys. While the car's design might have initially drawn in buyers, the lack of overall refinement made the Rekord P1 a car that failed to leave a lasting impression. In terms of reliability, the Rekord P1 had its share of issues. Though Opel was known for producing relatively durable vehicles, this model often faced mechanical problems, especially as it aged. The engine, while simple, wasn't particularly robust, and owners frequently reported issues with overheating and other mechanical failures, which only added to the car's reputation for being underwhelming. Despite its affordability, the Opel Rekord P1 ultimately didn't offer enough to distinguish itself in a competitive market. While it was a practical choice for budget-conscious families, it lacked the performance, comfort, and reliability that many other cars of the late 1950s could provide. The Rekord P1's good looks couldn't make up for its mediocre driving dynamics and lackluster build quality, and it quickly faded into the background as more advanced and appealing vehicles entered the market. Today, the Opel Rekord P1 is largely remembered as a stylish but forgettable footnote in the history of 1950s European cars, a vehicle that, despite its potential, never quite lived up to the promise of its design. The Zundapp Janus, produced between 1957 and 1958, is one of the most eccentric and unusual microcars ever created, earning its place in automotive history as a true oddity of the late 1950s. This peculiar vehicle was the brainchild of the Zundapp company, known primarily for its motorcycles and scooters. In an era when compact cars were becoming increasingly popular, the Janus emerged with a distinctive design that was both innovative and perplexing. One of the standout features of the Janus was its unusual layout. which included doors at both the front and rear while conspicuously lacking any side doors. This quirky design choice was intended to enhance accessibility and usability, allowing passengers to enter and exit from either end. However, it ultimately led to confusion among potential buyers, who found themselves puzzled by the car's unconventional entry points. Instead of presenting a clear advantage, the lack of side doors created an awkward experience, as passengers were often unsure whether to enter from the front or the rear. The unique design, while imaginative, made the Janus feel more like an art piece than a practical mode of transportation. Visually, the Zundapp Janus resembled a bubble, capturing the playful design trends of the era that favored compactness and efficiency. Its small dimensions meant that it was truly a microcar, but this came at the cost of interior space. The cabin was designed to accommodate 4 passengers, yet it quickly became apparent that it felt cramped, with limited legroom and headspace. The interior was simple and functional, lacking the comforts and amenities found in larger cars. The unusual dual-door setup, combined with its tiny dimensions, made entering and exiting a rather cumbersome affair. Passengers often had to navigate around each other, further detracting from the overall experience of using the car for everyday tasks. Under the hood, the Janus was powered by a modest 2-cylinder, 2-stroke engine, which produced a meager 12 horsepower. This limited power output resulted in painfully slow acceleration, with a top speed of around 50 miles per hour. Such performance rendered the Janus unsuitable for anything other than local commutes, as it struggled to keep pace with faster-moving traffic on the highways. The small engine was also notoriously noisy, contributing to a less-than-pleasant driving experience. While the Janus was marketed as an economical and affordable option for urban drivers, its performance limitations quickly became apparent, frustrating those who hoped for a reliable vehicle for daily use. The car's handling characteristics were another drawback. With its lightweight construction and high center of gravity, the Janus often felt unstable, particularly during turns. The small wheels and short wheelbase resulted in a bouncy ride, making it uncomfortable over uneven road surfaces. This combination of features further diminished the practicality of the Janus, as it was ill-suited for anything beyond short trips around town. While Zundapp aimed for the Janus to be a budget-friendly vehicle, it ultimately fell short of meeting consumer expectations. Buyers seeking reliable transportation for their daily needs frequently gravitated toward more conventional cars that offered superior performance and comfort. The Janus's distinctive design and whimsical appearance may have attracted some initial attention, but it soon became clear that it was more of a novelty than a serious contender in the automotive market. Production of the Janus was notably brief, lasting only a year with approximately 6,000 units produced. The combination of its odd design, lack of power, and questionable practicality ultimately led to its demise. Despite its failure to gain traction in the market, the Zundapp Janus remains an intriguing example of mid-20th century automotive experimentation. Today, collectors and automotive enthusiasts regard it as a fascinating piece of history. A car that dared to defy convention, but ultimately couldn't find its place in a world that favored practicality and conventional design. In contemporary discussions of automotive history, the Zundapp Janus serves as a reminder of a time when manufacturers pushed the boundaries of design in their quest to capture the market's attention. It embodies the spirit of innovation that characterized the era, even if that innovation sometimes resulted in bizarre and unconventional creations. Its status as a collector's item today highlights how, over time, the quirky and the unconventional can become celebrated facets of automotive heritage, appreciated for their uniqueness and the stories they tell about the industry's evolution. The Simca Aronde, produced from 1951 to 1964, was launched in the aftermath of World War II, a time when the French automotive market was desperate for affordable and practical family vehicles. Designed to meet the needs of a nation that was rebuilding itself, the Aronde was pitched as a budget-friendly car for the masses. However, despite its initial promise, the vehicle soon became notorious for a range of reliability issues that tarnished its reputation and frustrated its owners. From the outset, the Aronde was positioned as an economical choice for families. With its modest price tag, it appealed to those who sought reliable transportation without breaking the bank. However, the very affordability that attracted buyers became a double-edged sword. Many owners quickly discovered that the low purchase price often translated into higher long-term costs due to frequent repairs. The car's engine, while designed to be efficient, suffered from various mechanical problems that plagued its performance. Owners reported instances of stalling, poor acceleration, and even catastrophic failures that required significant repairs. As the car aged, these reliability issues became more pronounced, leading to a wave of dissatisfaction among its user base. In terms of design, the Simca Aronde was functional, but lacked the flair that many contemporary vehicles boasted. Its boxy silhouette and straightforward styling did not captivate the imagination of consumers looking for a bit of excitement in their daily drivers. While the Aronde was undeniably practical, offering adequate space for families, it came with a rather uninspired aesthetic that made it blend into the background rather than stand out in a competitive market. The interior was equally basic, with minimal features that often left drivers and passengers feeling cramped and uncomfortable. There were few creature comforts, and the overall driving experience was far from luxurious. Buyers looking for a stylish and modern family car were likely to feel disappointed by the Aronde's lack of character. One of the most significant shortcomings of the Simca Aronde was its performance. The car's handling was often criticized, particularly on uneven road surfaces. Its suspension system was designed to be cost-effective rather than sophisticated, which resulted in a ride that was bumpy and unrefined. Passengers frequently found themselves jolted around during journeys, making longer trips less enjoyable. The engine, which struggled to provide adequate power, contributed to an overall driving experience that was far from engaging. The lack of responsiveness made it challenging for drivers to feel confident behind the wheel, especially when navigating hilly terrain or merging onto busy roads. Although the Simca Aronde had its share of flaws, it did manage to capture a segment of the market. It was seen as a sensible choice for families who prioritized affordability over style or performance. In a period when many were still recovering from the economic impact of the war, the Aronde offered a practical solution for getting around. For some, it served as a reliable workhorse, shuttling children to school and transporting groceries without fuss. However, as competing manufacturers began to offer more appealing alternatives that combined reliability with comfort and style, the Aronde began to lose its foothold in the market. Over the years, Simca made various attempts to refresh the Aronde and address some of its shortcomings. Newer models featured minor updates to improve comfort and aesthetics, but these changes often failed to rectify the core issues that plagued the vehicle. As consumer preferences shifted toward cars that offered a better balance of price, performance, and style, the Aronde's market share began to dwindle. Many owners who once viewed it as a practical option began to explore newer models from brands that promised greater reliability and a more enjoyable driving experience. Production of the Simca Aronde officially came to an end in 1964, having sold approximately 1.3 million units throughout its production run. While the Aronde is often remembered for its role as a budget vehicle in post-war France, its legacy is one of mixed reviews. Today, it stands as a reminder of the challenges faced by manufacturers in meeting the diverse needs of consumers, particularly in a rapidly changing automotive landscape. Collectors and automotive enthusiasts may view the Aronde with nostalgia, appreciating its place in history while acknowledging its shortcomings. In retrospect, the Simca Aronde exemplifies the difficulties of balancing cost and quality in the automotive industry. It serves as a case study of how a well-intentioned vehicle can falter due to design flaws, mechanical issues, and changing consumer expectations. The Aronde remains an interesting chapter in the history of budget cars. The Hillman Super Minx, produced from 1961 to 1967, was designed as an affordable family car during a time when the British automotive market was shifting towards offering more practical vehicles for the masses. Although it aimed to provide a cost-effective solution for families seeking reliable transportation, the Super Minx struggled to make a significant impact in a competitive landscape dominated by more exciting and capable offerings from other manufacturers. One of the most notable drawbacks of the Hillman Super Minx was its performance. Equipped with a modest engine that delivered lackluster power, the car was often described as heavy and sluggish, making it less than thrilling to drive. This deficiency became especially apparent when compared to rivals that offered sportier handling and better acceleration. Many drivers found themselves frustrated by the Super Minx's inability to keep pace with modern traffic, particularly during highway merging or overtaking maneuvers. The car's acceleration was uninspiring, and the overall driving experience was far from exhilarating. In addition to its underpowered engine, the Hillman Super Minx was criticized for its handling capabilities. The car's suspension system was basic and did little to instill confidence in drivers when navigating corners or uneven road surfaces. Instead of feeling stable and secure, the Super Minx often exhibited a sense of body roll that made it feel cumbersome and less responsive. This handling characteristic detracted from the overall driving experience, leading to a perception of the car as unexciting and rather uninspiring on the road. While the Super Minx offered decent interior space, providing enough room for families and their belongings, this advantage was not enough to overshadow its performance shortcomings. The cabin was designed with practicality in mind, featuring a straightforward layout and ample legroom for both front and rear passengers. However, the interior materials and finishes were basic and unremarkable, lacking the quality or charm that some competing vehicles offered. Many potential buyers found themselves drawn to rivals that combined practicality with more engaging designs and better driving dynamics. The Hillman Super Minx was a classic representation of a family car that prioritized affordability over performance. It served as a practical option for many families looking for a reliable means of transportation, but it failed to generate excitement among drivers. As the automotive market evolved and consumer preferences began to shift towards vehicles that offered a combination of style, performance, and comfort, the Super Minx quickly began to fade into the background. Despite its shortcomings, the Super Minx did find a niche among budget-conscious buyers who were primarily concerned with getting from point A to point B without breaking the bank. It became a common sight on British roads during its production run, with many families relying on it for daily commutes and weekend outings. However, the lack of standout features or performance left many owners wishing for a more engaging driving experience. In retrospect, the Hillman Super Minx illustrates the challenges faced by manufacturers in a highly competitive automotive market. While it may have met the basic needs of many consumers, it lacked the flair and excitement that drove buyers toward more appealing options. As newer models with improved performance and style began to emerge, the Super Minx struggled to maintain its relevance, eventually leading to its discontinuation in the late 1960s. Today, the Hillman Super Minx is often remembered as a symbol of the era's budget family cars. While it may not have achieved the lasting legacy of more celebrated models, it nonetheless holds a place in the history of British motoring as a testament to the challenges and triumphs of designing affordable vehicles for everyday drivers. Collectors and automotive enthusiasts may look back on the Super Minx with a sense of nostalgia, acknowledging its role in the evolution of family cars while also recognizing its limitations in terms of performance and excitement. The Fiat 1100, produced from 1953 to 1969, represents a significant chapter in the history of affordable European cars. As Italy emerged from the shadows of World War II, the need for economical and practical vehicles became increasingly pronounced. Fiat responded to this demand with the 1100, a model designed to cater to the everyday needs of families and individuals looking for reliable transportation without breaking the bank. At first glance, the Fiat 1100 presented a modest, unassuming exterior. Its design was characteristic of the era, favoring functionality over flair. The rounded lines and compact dimensions made it suitable for navigating narrow city streets, while the four-door configuration offered practical access for families. While the aesthetics were not particularly inspiring, the focus was squarely on delivering a vehicle that met the practical needs of its buyers. One of the defining features of the Fiat 1100 was its affordability. The car was priced to attract a broad customer base, appealing to those who may have struggled to afford a vehicle in the immediate post-war years. However, this affordability came with trade-offs. The car was often criticized for its build quality, particularly its susceptibility to rust. Many owners reported issues with corrosion, which could develop in areas like the wheel wells and undercarriage, leading to concerns about the vehicle's longevity. The frequent need for repairs to address rust-related issues detracted from its reputation as a dependable car and often left owners frustrated with their investment. Under the hood, the Fiat 1100 was equipped with a small, underpowered engine that limited its performance capabilities. The engine's modest output made it less than ideal for highway driving, where more power would have been advantageous for merging into fast-moving traffic or overtaking slower vehicles. Drivers often found the car sluggish, particularly when loaded with passengers or cargo. This lack of power became a common complaint among owners, who yearned for a more spirited driving experience. The Fiat 1100's interior was functional but Spartan, reflecting the car's budget-conscious design ethos. While there was adequate seating for passengers, the materials used in the interior were basic and lacked the comfort and style found in more upscale vehicles. The dashboard was straightforward, with simple instrumentation that provided the necessary information without any unnecessary frills. Amenities were limited, with few options for modern conveniences such as advanced heating or sound insulation. Consequently, longer journeys could feel tedious, with road noise and minimal creature comforts contributing to a less enjoyable driving experience. Despite its shortcomings, the Fiat 1100 carved out a niche for itself in the marketplace. Its compact size made it ideal for urban environments, where maneuverability and ease of parking were crucial for daily use. Families found it to be a practical solution for running errands and commuting, even if it didn't deliver the excitement or comfort that some other cars offered. Its economical nature made it a viable choice for those on tight budgets, fulfilling the primary role of transportation without imposing significant financial burdens. Throughout its production run, the Fiat 1100 underwent various updates and redesigns, which aimed to address some of the criticisms leveled at it. While subsequent models attempted to enhance performance and comfort, they still retained the core philosophy of affordability. The car's legacy as a budget-friendly option remained intact, but as consumer preferences began to shift toward more powerful and stylish vehicles, the Fiat 1010 found itself overshadowed by newer competitors. By the late 1960s, the automotive landscape was changing rapidly. Consumers began to expect more from their vehicles in terms of performance, comfort, and features. As such, the Fiat 1100 gradually faded from the limelight, replaced by models that better aligned with evolving tastes. Nevertheless, the 1100 holds a special place in automotive history, representing an era when cars were designed with simplicity and practicality in mind. Today, the Fiat 1100 is often celebrated among classic car enthusiasts as a nostalgic reminder of post-war European motoring. Its straightforward design and functionality speak to a time when vehicles were primarily seen as tools for transportation rather than status symbols. While its limitations in performance and durability may have hindered its long-term appeal, these cars may have been affordable, but they were often slow, unreliable, and poorly built, offering little more than basic transportation. For many, they were the only option, but they certainly didn't inspire pride or excitement on the road. Their lasting legacy is a reminder of how far automotive design and engineering have come since the 1950s and 1960s.